The following message is from King's Church 1066, based in Hastings, Bexhill and the surrounding area. For more information, head to our website, kings1066.org.
Okay, so turn to the person next to you, and if you can remember, what was your most favourite kid story when you were a kid? If you ever read a story or anything like that, what was your favourite story that you were read? Or is there a favourite TV programme that you had when you were little? Or what's one thing that you can remember when you were little? Kids, tell your parents what your favourite story is. Do that for 1 minute. Get us a drink.
Just in case you forget.
Oh, yeah. Nice one, mate. Dan, I did. Oh, you're a legend. Thanks, Dan. I need a wee roller. Okay, while you're still talking, I'm going to be talking for about 5 or 10 minutes. We've actually got an activity sheet for the children, or for any age, to be honest with you. Just over where Dan is waving. Okay, so if you want to go over and get a sheet while I'm talking, then please feel free. What's on the sheet is kind of like a cartoon. Who remembers Beano? Anyone remember the Beano? Okay, one of the best bit of reading material you are ever going to read is the Beano. And it's like a comic, and what you get to do on this piece of paper is a blank comic strip, and what we'd love you to do is to draw a story. Okay, it might be a story of something that God's done for you, it might be a story of something for you at school or at home. Whatever it is, this is your chance to just draw out some kind of a story that's kind of important to you, if that's all right. Adults, you are more than free to do that as well if you get bored. Just kind of like, I don't know, whatever you want to do. So I've got a teenage son who's 17 years old, and he is very sarcastic. Put your hand up if you're a parent and you've ever had a teenager who is slightly sarcastic. I'm glad I'm not on my own. And so when we're trying to say a funny story to my son, I don't think he's gonna know that I'm talking about him, so that's all right. Whenever we say, so me and Ros can be talking, Ros, my wife, we can be saying something that we find just really funny that's happened in the week. And from the back of the car, you get this most incredibly realistic, sarcastic, fake laugh, okay? And then he comes out with this thing. No, it's really not. It's all right. We're not hurt by it. It's actually a funny story. Then he comes out with this little saying, cool. It was something like, it's funny because it's relatable. And it really isn't relatable to him, and it's really not funny. It's just him being slightly sarcastic. And actually, we find it's all right. It's actually okay. I feel a sense of concern in the room now I've said that. It's all right. It's just a teenage boy that's kind of like slightly sarcastic and slightly funny. And the thing is, that little saying is funny because it's relatable. Actually, stories are incredibly important because most of the time, there's something in it that hopefully could be relatable. We're surrounded by stories all the time. If you go to the coffee shop, if you go to the pub, if you're sitting wherever you are with someone else, most of the time you're talking about something that's, don't know, it could be what's happened in your day, what's happened in your week, or did you watch this on telly, or what book are you reading, or what's going on in your family life. Whatever it is, most of the time, without us knowing, we're actually conveying stories of what is actually going on around us, for someone else, what's influencing us, all this kind of stuff. So stories are incredibly, incredibly powerful. Really, really powerful. Who knows who J.K. Rowling is? Put your hand up if you know J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series and that kind of stuff. One of the most incredible authors, really, really quite creative. Here's a quote from J.K. Rowling. There's always room for a story that can transport people to another place, whether that's fictional or whether it's a non-fictional, everyday kind of story. Stories have the power to take a person from where they are actually to somewhere new, either in their imagination or actually deep within their heart in one way, shape or form. And here's the thing that I love about being a Christian. Here's the thing I love about the Bible. The Bible is full of stories. It is full of stories, real life accounts from history of God getting involved in the world that he made and in the world that he lives in to show up and give humanity an understanding that first he's real, second he exists, and third what he's got to say to us and the best way of living really, and that he wants to be present with us in our everyday. The Bible is full of stories and truth and account that really, really matter. So when we read this story and we pick it up, it has an incredible influence on our life. It can change us, it can change how we think, it can change our perspective and so much stuff. And this room as well, I know, is full of stories, real life stories of how God himself has got involved in our lives. There is. Whether it's how you became a Christian, that's a story. Whether it's when God provided for you in one way, shape or form, that's a story. Whatever it is, at any point that God has got involved in your life, the times when you know it, and I believe there are probably millions of times where God's got involved and we don't actually know it, to be honest with you. But the times when we know it, that is a story that you have and that you can hold on to of God getting involved in your life. And those kinds of things really, really matter. They matter. It's a room full of stories about God. When these stories are told, they can transport someone else to a different place of faith. Your story can transport someone else to a different place of faith. A different perspective on life, a possible new hope. Our stories can bring understanding, they can bring empathy to those around us. And in the case of God, our stories can bring truth, they can bring life, they can bring hope, they can bring compassion, they can bring love, they can bring empathy. And our stories can have the incredibly powerful effect that when you share something with someone, all of a sudden they feel incredibly understood. They feel incredibly not alone anymore, because when you share your story, sometimes the person that's listening can actually think, that's amazing, I'm not the only one that's feeling this way. I'm not the only one who's experiencing something like this, where I thought I was the only one in the world that this happened to and it's all a bit weird and I think I'm going crazy. When someone shares their story with you, actually you realise we're all in the same kind of boat. And our stories can kind of like pick up a bit of empathy where it's like, I'm not the only one who's kind of felt like that. And that brings some understanding and that brings a certain amount of calm and a certain amount of peace. So our stories in ourselves really matter. Our stories about God really, really matter, especially in the context of the local church and those people around us. Is there a quote to go up on the screen? Have we got my one slide? I've done one preach slide. Here it is. Have a quick listen to this. Every testimony. A testimony is a story, a true account of something that God has done. Every testimony brings something of heaven into the atmosphere. It gives us a divine moment when things shift and are transformed because a record of God's activity is revealed to us. And I don't care how big or how small you feel your story is, it's an account of God at work. And that changes the atmosphere. I'm going to invite Ros to come up. Ros is going to share something for a minute. She's just going to share a story. And I really hope it's of encouragement to some of us, and I'm sure it will be to many of us. This is Ros, my wife. You all right?
I'm good, thank you. Okay, so are we sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. So I like to set a scene with a story. So Joseph's story earlier was going to bed at midnight. This was a little after midnight. So the context is 1995. I'd just finished university. I'd trained as a teacher, just qualified, was about to start teaching. My parents, to try and give me a bit of encouragement in the thick of a very busy time of the year, had said, we're going away in the summer and you can stay on the couch for a little bit extra. Do you want to come? All right then. you know, when you haven't got a lot of money as a student. So I was on this holiday with my parents. Now, this was about 1 a.m. It was very, very dark. The problem was it was not on land. So this story is not on land. It was very, very dark. It was on a very large ship just off Margate in the English Channel, and it was at the end of the holiday. It was on a cruise ship called the Norwegian Dream. And at about 1 a.m, some vast, lots and lots of lights started coming towards the windows. I was chatting, telling stories, of course, at this time. Parents were asleep, and there was a very large crash and impact. Now, that's not a great place to be in. Rushed down, all sort of alarms going. It was blacked out, but there was sort of a tiny light to follow. Follow the tiny light. Basically, at this point, women and children first, the lifeboats were coming off. Again, quite a scary place to be. However, at this point, I remembered a song that I'd learnt when I was very little, and it was, Jesus, we enthrone you, we proclaim you our King, standing here in the midst of us. And at that point, everything stood still. It was absolute chaos. It was black dark. There was people everywhere. There was a lot of noise. And it was like time stood still, like in a movie where there was things going on, but it was like a silence. And there was a sense of peace that I've never felt since, because it was just so dramatic. And basically what had happened, we didn't know till after, but some people were airlifted off. Not one person died, but a container ship had impacted the cruise ship and had cut a hole into the front of it. Some of the containers were on the ship. The other ship was on fire, but not one person died. Everyone came to land to Dover alive. And all I can say was, Jesus, we enthrone you. We proclaim you our King. He was in the midst of us. And I can also say that even bigger miracle is my happy place is on the water on a boat. I am so happy there. So it's a story to tell of the wonders that Jesus can do. But also I love being on the water because he's with me even more there. And that's my story to tell. Thank you.
So in the scariest moment, the reality is if God's real and he exists, then he can bring peace. And that's a very real, very true story, that God turned up in the middle of a cruise ship when it had crashed with another ship. And that don't happen every day. And there he is, peace. At a time when life's crazy. There's another story. Thanks for that, darling. There's another story in the Bible where Jesus encounters a lady at the well. And Jesus kind of like has this incredible ability to relate to people and tell things through stories, but actually to understand people at the quickest, most important time. And what the lady realized was that Jesus knew everything about her through this conversation that had happened. Everything about her. They talked about religion, they talked about life, they talked about all sorts of different things. And as I was conversing, Jesus' kind of like input into that woman's life was life-changing. She realised she had met someone incredibly amazing and incredibly important. So what she did, she ran back to her village and she told her village, I've just met this guy who's told me everything about myself. He's the most fascinating, most intriguing man I have ever met. You really need to come and hear him. You really need to kind of get your head around who this person actually is. Come and see the guy that told me everything about myself. Because there's something very special about him. And the story goes on. I'll read it from John 4, verse 39 to 42. I'll need my glasses. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in Jesus because of the woman's testimony. Many in one town came to know and believe in Jesus because of one person's experience and testimony. When she went and told them everything. He told me everything I ever did, said the woman. So when the Samaritans came to Jesus, they urged him to stay with them. And he stayed with them for 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we don't just believe because of what you've said. Now we have heard for ourselves and we know that this man really is the saviour of the world. And there's this beautiful, wonderful story that unfolds where this lady's testimony, her personal experience and encounter with Jesus, she goes and shares it with a village and everyone in the village gets curious. But the thing is, they act on their curiosity and they invite Jesus to come, and he stays for 2 days. And over a period of 2 days, they really just get to know what he's got to say and who he is. And because of that, they come to believe themselves. All from the story of one lady. Our stories are powerful. They stir curiosity to help people respond to different things at different moments. There's a wonderful thing about if you're a Christian and you've got a story, and you've got a story to tell, and you would love someone who doesn't know Jesus to know Jesus through your testimony. And I find this bit of the Bible so encouraging and so helpful. Can you stick that thing back up on the screen, mate? Can you stick that quote back up? Let's leave that up there. But there's a brilliant bit in the Bible that helps me when I'm sharing my testimony with other people, and it's this, 1 Corinthians 3, verse 5 to 9. It talks about some people are called to plant and some people are called to water, and they're about the same work and they want the same kind of ending. What that means is we're all about the same kind of thing. We would love people to know Jesus, and we would love them to come to a certain point in their faith, right? And our testimonies help people do that. But what it goes on to say is that only God can make things grow. Only God can make things grow. People becoming a Christian actually isn't our responsibility. That's God's responsibility. Our responsibility is to share our stories. That's it. God does all the growing. We don't have to do that. We can't do that. But we just get to this point where we get to share our story. We get to explain to people what Jesus means. Get to explain all that stuff. All that's important. But only God can make things grow. We don't have to take that on ourselves, which is the best news ever, because I can't cope with that and I can't do that. But what I can do is just be honest and real with people. This is what Jesus has done. This is what he means to me. This is my story. This is my testimony. Our stories are the seed, in a sense, and the watering, but only God can make it grow to salvation. Only God can make it grow to salvation. And in the local church as well, and around us, not just in church, outside of someone becoming a Christian, our stories are incredibly powerful. Hebrews 10:24 talks about don't give up meeting together. Consider how you can spur one another on towards love, towards good faith, towards not abandoning the faith, towards encouraging one another. And once again, our stories are one of those things. When we get together, they encourage one another. Share your stories. Share what God's done. Share what God's doing. Take time to have a coffee. If you don't quite know what to talk about, just say, right, well, this is what God has been doing. Because every testimony brings something of heaven into the atmosphere. Every testimony, it gives us a divine moment when things shift and are transformed because a record of God's activity is revealed. Most of the time when people become Christians, it's not a one-off thing. They hear story after story after story after story, event after event after event, and it leads them somewhere. Your testimony may just be one of the steps that helps people come to faith. It might not be the step or the one step, but our stories matter to people around us. I'm going to round up by saying one thing. Do you remember the fishermen? Any fishermen in the room before we move on? We've got any fishermen in the room? Okay. Please, if you're a fisherman, can you stand up? There's only one. Are you going to do it, Martin? No, you don't have to, mate. Okay, Martin. Give these two a round of applause. Okay. Guys. By way of hands, show how big the biggest fish is that you have ever caught. Right. Okay, so how many... Thanks, guys. You can take your seat. So it's that fisherman's story. I know what it's like. How big was the last fish you caught? Honestly, it was massive. It was the length of a conger eel and weighed the same weight as Moby Dick or something like that. It's just the biggest thing you've ever seen and that kind of stuff. Our testimonies and our stories, we don't have to add stuff to them. It makes them incongruent. We don't have to add stuff to make them any bigger than they are. And I'll tell you why. Because every testimony brings something of heaven into the atmosphere and gives a divine moment when things shift and are transformed because it's a record of God's work. You don't have to add to what God's done. We really don't. We don't have to make our testimonies any brighter or shinier or clearer. Just be honest about what God's done. Everyday, normal stuff when God breaks in. But at the same time, don't downplay it so much that you kind of do it. Don't be shy about your story. Mix it with some faith and some oomph to say, no, there's a God in heaven that got involved in my life and this is what he's done. It's amazing. It's amazing what your story can do to build faith in those people that know God and those people that don't know God. So your stories matter. Don't compare your story to anyone else's story. Your one matters. It doesn't have to be any bigger or any smaller to anyone else's. Your one matters. Last thing, for me, success is more in the sharing of my story than anything else. If I have the bravery to say, right, this is my story, at that moment in time, I feel like I've actually done something that's pretty cool. I've done what that screen says. Success isn't all of a sudden someone just responding straight away. Success is, do you know what? I've shared my story. I've done what I'm here to do. Enjoy it for yourself. So I'd encourage everyone, share your stories. We're going to watch a couple of video stories and then I'm going to hand over to Janelle.
Just like to quickly say, I've been following Jesus since I was 12 years old, but when my life really turned around and I received the gift of faith was about 13 years ago. Things were not going too good, and as a family we were going to be made homeless, but I stood on the roof one night and I prayed to Jesus to please help me, and I was really angry, but just to please help me. And all of a sudden, from nowhere, I was filled with this joy and this love what I cannot express, and I just felt that the faith had been given to me. He told me to look in the Bible, where to read, he told me what to do, and from that day I could not stop smiling and just completely felt that I'd been filled with faith, and that's how important it felt to me. And from that day on, I have been known, no matter what you do in your life, God is real and God is so faithful and he is holding my hand no matter what.
What Jesus did for me is give me strength in the times when I didn't have any of my own. So anytime I needed it, I can just pray to God from when I was very young, and I would feel the boost of strength for myself.
And when I went to New Day, I gave my life to Jesus. Now back to Jenny's one.
Well, back to our live stream, everyone. Today we are learning about what Jesus has done for us. And Jesus has done for me. I was playing a football match, but I was losing really badly just because all my players were injured. My team's not really bad. But then I realised that it was just a game so I told the Holy Spirit, and then it told me it was just a game, so I was totally fun about it. And now back to Mum's live stream, Clara Crazy.
We struggled to find somewhere to live for various reasons, but God provided in the most amazing way, and we have now a place to live. The children both have, beds. They've got places to sleep, and we are safe. And that is what God has done for us.
A few years ago, I had pneumonia quite badly, and after a while, I was able to hobble to church. There was a call from the front for healing, but I just knew God was going to do something. And I went to the front, and I remember Santino praying for me, but I just knew God had already done it. I actually went home, hobbled home, and after lunch, nothing happened. And then a few hours after that, I suddenly got all my strength back, and I was totally healed, and I praise the Lord for his healing. Amen.